This lecture is designed to look at the constitutional powers of the president. And what I mean by that are the actual powers that are listed within the Constitution. So we're talking about enumerated powers here. And I think it's very interesting because when you look at the actual outline of the Constitution and what the president can do, we have a very inflated sense um, of what role they have within our legislative and policymaking process. Um, the president is one of the least defined branches in our government simply because the founders were so afraid of giving him too much power that they ultimately didn't give him enough power. And what we'll talk about in class is how the powers of the president have been expanded because the definition of these powers have been so loose. So the powers of the president can be divided into four areas. First, and the biggest area that the president does have a lot of leeway is in national security. He is the commander in chief of the armed services. And one thing that I think is interesting is even like a Dwight Eisenhower had to give up his position as general to become commander in chief. So it's a symbolic notion or symbolic action that the leader of our military and the leader of our government is not a military leader. It is a citizen, and it is a citizen running the government, or citizen running the military, not a general. They can make treaties with other nations. Obviously, those have to be approved by the Senate. They can nominate ambassadors to work on our behalf in other countries, but again, those have to be approved by the Senate. And then they can receive ambassadors as well. So President Trump could bring the ambassador from China or the ambassador of Canada to the White House and talk to them. Oftentimes, you'll see diplomatic dinners or state dinners where the president's kind of wining and dining leaders, and they're coming to the U.S. and serving as a representative of their country to us. The president is taking them in and discussing things with them. There are legislative powers that the president holds. Most notably, is he is required to give a State of the Union. The Constitution does not say that he has to give a speech every year in person. I believe it was Woodrow Wilson that was the first to actually deliver that in front of Congress, and that has been a tradition ever since. And now it is a yearly tradition. He can recommend legislation to Congress, so he can say to a congressman, "This is what I would like for you to see done. I would like for you to try and push this," but the president cannot start the legislative process. So if the president doesn't get a congressman on board, then there's nothing he can do in terms of that particular piece of legislation becoming a law. If there's a situation where Congress has gone on break or on recess for a vacation or a holiday, if there's something that comes up, he can bring them back. And he can say to them, get back here within X amount of days to deal with this particular issue. He can adjourn them if the House and the Senate cannot agree on adjournment. So he can say you're done. But typically, you don't necessarily see that happen a lot. And then finally, he can veto legislation. And obviously, Congress can overrule that veto, but it is a very, very small percentage of bills that are vetoed or overridden by the Congress. In fact, I believe Barack Obama only had one piece of legislation that was actually overruled, and that was when the House and the Senate were both liberal or Democrat, and they overruled his veto on whether or not 9/11 families could stand to sue Saudi Arabia for their involvement in 9/11. The Congress wanted families to be able to do it. President Obama vetoed it. The Congress overrode the veto, and it became law. So it happens very, very rarely. There are administrative powers. Basically, the Congress or the Constitution has said that the president has the power to faithfully execute the law. So what that means is they can nominate the officials to different agencies and bureaucratic organizations. But again, in many of those cases, they have to be approved by the Senate. They can request written opinions of the administrative officials. In fact, as you'll see, or as you have seen, the president can go to these officials and the heads of these departments and say, how much money do you need for this given year? And then ultimately, they can also fill administrative vacancies during a congressional recess. And there was a situation under the Obama administration that this happened with the National Labor Relations Board. And I don't remember all that, so I don't necessarily go into it a little bit, but they can do that. And then finally, you have judicial powers. And really, there's only two. They can grant pardons and reprieves, except in the case of an impeachment. And you might be thinking, well, Nixon got pardoned. Well, Nixon was also never impeached. So he was able to be pardoned. But, anytime that somebody is convicted, the president can overturn that conviction for anything. I mean, he doesn't need to have a reason. He just says, you're pardoned, you're out of jail, your sentence has been commuted, and you move on. And then finally, they can have their say in the direction of the federal court system by nominating federal judges. We tend to only think of this as a process for the Supreme Court, but as you will see when we start to talk about the federal court system, they also nominate the federal district and the appellate court judges. So a president really can have a say in how the overall law or legislation is interpreted by the Constitution. These are the things the president is enumerated. These are the things that he is allowed to do based on the Constitution. But I think, as you will see, there's a higher expectation of what the president can do or should do in a given moment, and we will be talking about those in the coming days. If you have any questions about these, please feel free to reach out.